Thank you very much. I thank you for inviting me today. One of the things that a lot of politicians will actually say when they see the Tea Parties is, oh my goodness, what is going on? What, can we control them or whatnot? You know what I think? Thank God for the reinforcements. You know, Senator Hendren actually mentioned, and his number actually is working out higher than what I was thinking about as far as what the condition of the state budget is right now. We've got 270, I think he mentioned $290 million in debt. The state's in debt to the unemployment trust, the federal government. Now I asked, how can a state with a balanced budget actually be allowed to go into the debt? And I've asked that to some of the people at Bureau of Legislative Research and whatnot, been asking around, and of course I get this answer that's legalese, mumbo jumbo. Is technically we may not be violating the letter of what the law is. You know, nobody ever talks about what the intent of the authors of that Constitution was trying to say. This is fundamental to part of what our problem is. We're going to leave it up to a judge to decide what the founder of this state put into their legal documents. Because we're not going to. And the reason we're not going to is because we're going to put legislators in the state house that's actually going to go and vote and make sure that the intent, not the letter, of our Constitution is actually put in place. Is that right? Now, we've got programs going on out there for one thing and another, and we've all talked about a bunch of programs today that's actually busting our state budget. We've got a highway transportation department. One of the fundamental good things about what the government should be doing is building and taking care of our public infrastructure. But we can't find $200 million for our highways, minimum, just to maintain them, because we've got all these other budget busting things going on. Now, one of the things about it, we talk about priorities. What else is another priority? Our prison systems. We've got a $16 million facility in Arkadelphia that we can't open up because we can't find $2.8 million because we're going to waste it on all these transfer programs. So you got a $16 million for the facility sitting empty and we're releasing prisoners. What kind of sense does that make? What kind of good government is that? None. Guy had a 2% cut last time. Governor's a little bit more optimistic for next year. I'm not. History hadn't shown that we should actually be continuing the baseline. We probably need to be doing some more cuts in the budget this next time, if nothing else, just for efficiency's sake. But as you can see, we've got budget problems. And then that means that we absolutely have to come out against these things that are busting our state budget from the federal government. Some of you have already heard some of the estimates. The governor says $205 million is what health care costs us. Well, the leftward-leaning nonpartisan organization, National Conference of State Legislators, says that's $400 million. I think the first speaker said $400 million. Let's look at it from another direction as far as what Medicaid actually impacts. It's supposed to grow Medicaid in the state of Arkansas. The Heritage Foundation says it'll grow Medicaid in the state of Arkansas by 39%. Now, since it's almost or closing in on a $4 billion program in the state of Arkansas, and you get a 3-to-1 match, that's a $400 million impact on the state of Arkansas. So no matter which way you slice it, the governor's about halfway there to what it's really going to impact. Because everybody else is coming up with closer to $400 million. He's coming up with about $200 million.
So right off the bat, I can kind of sum this up, the feeling of this, in one phrase, and that is, welcome to the revolution. If that makes some of you uncomfortable to say that, because perhaps it sounds a little radical, consider this quote: every generation needs a new revolution. That prescription came from Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, my kind of radical. After the Revolution of Independence, this nation began as a group of allied states under the Articles of Confederation. Founding fathers envisioned that to be the great nation we're called to be to this world, we should form a more perfect union, and the Constitution of the United States was drafted. But the focus and the safeguards of the Constitution stress federalism, the sovereignty of states. The role of the national government was restricted and specifically defined. And I say this in context, to provide the context, because what is going on in Washington today would horrify our founding fathers. It is foreign to their intent and what they meant when they wrote the Constitution. And I have to tell you, I do not believe that the Constitution is a living document, adaptable to fit the times. Rather, it is an abiding principle, a bedrock, to stand a great nation upon. Today, two major pieces of legislation are being forced on the American people against their will: government control of health care and cap and tax. The effect of either of these on Arkansas would be traumatic. If both of them pass, it would be disastrous. Not counting the impact of the federal taxes that you will all pay, the unfunded mandate of additional net costs to the state, as has been mentioned before, would be somewhere between $200 and $400 million. Now, Arkansas, as said, we have a constitutionally mandated balanced budget, thank God. And we don't have a Federal Reserve that is capable of printing money out of thin air. So what is going to happen is this $200 million is coming out of services or higher taxes or a combination of both. Medicare is broke. Congress' idea about this is, if it's broke, then expand it. In business, I've never seen that work. The provision that would force Americans to either purchase insurance or face fine or imprisonment has to be in violation of the Constitution. I cannot imagine the federal government's role like that being envisioned by our founding fathers. Now, cap and tax would cost our average Arkansans household about $1,000 per year. We have a per capita income of $28,000. How are we going to afford that? You know, most Arkansans live in rural areas and commute long distances to work. There is no way to afford that. This is a political agenda of tax and control. Oh, they tout science, but I want to tell you they violate the scientific method. You see, they've gone from hypothesis to theory. And all the observation and the facts, if those don't fit the script, well, then you either make them up or throw them out. Because this is about money. This is about money and power. This is not about CO2. In fact, if you pass, 20% of the revenue from cap and tax goes to organizations and activist groups that have nothing to do with moderating the amount of CO2 in the planet.